They thought they were dragging a primitive species into their 1,000-year war. What they didn't know. Humans don't just fight, we burn, rebuild, and rewrite the rules. Now the galaxy watches as Earth's forgotten soldiers turn battlegrounds into burial grounds, and entire empires into cautionary tales. They called it a mutual defense accord. Earth called it hope. Trade routes, shared science, interstellar peace. The promises shone brighter than the stars above. The Valari ascendancy made first contact, cloaked in gold-trimmed robes and soft diplomatic language. Their emissaries smiled, flattered Earth's resilience, praised humanity's rise from savagery to spaceflight in just a few centuries. Behind closed doors, they were less poetic. They breed fast, fight harder when desperate. Deploy them to Crassel 9. If they survive that, we'll consider actual negotiations. The ink wasn't dry before the first dropships launched. No farewell parades. No presidential speeches. Just cold orders. Mobilize Terran Division Theta. 30,000 soldiers. Minimal armor. No orbital support. Just a joint peacekeeping operation on a desolate mining moon where the Tsar Dominion had held ground for decades. A moon they called the Bone Forge. The Valari commanders watched with silent amusement as the humans were dropped like seeds into a furnace. 6 weeks later, only one came back. He wasn't supposed to. Captain Joel Rains arrived on Valari Command Station Dros 14 via hijacked Tsar troop carrier, one arm shattered, armor scorched black, dragging 5 unconscious Tsar commanders in zero-G restraints behind him. He didn't speak until they tried to detain him. "You sent us to die," he growled, voice gravel rough. "Now you'll explain why. Before I find out on my own." The station's commanding officer, a Valari high strategist named Alvelon Dros, tried to laugh. "Human, this is war. Collateral." Rains dropped a severed Tsar spine on the floor between them. "I didn't ask for clarification. I asked for a reason." They locked him up. The next morning, he was gone. So were 3 Valari security officers. And the armory vault. Officially, Earth filed no complaint. Not even when news of the slaughter on Crassel 9 spread through back channels. Not when soldiers' families demanded answers. Not when journalists leaked orbital scans of mass graves. They stayed silent. But the silence was seeded with rage. The next human unit deployed was different. They weren't bright-eyed patriots. They weren't hopeful. They weren't uniformed in clean insignia and flag patches. They were quiet. Hardened. Some of them had burned their flags. And they were not sent by any known government. The Valari called them reinforcements. The humans called themselves unbroken. Their orders were simple: operate without oversight. Objectives fluid. No chains of command. No retreat protocols. Strike when ready. Crassel 9 was renamed Rain's Grave. The Tsar abandoned it within a month. Nobody could explain why. All that was known was this: the temperature had risen 12 degrees. The water had turned black. And no bodies were ever recovered. Then came Crassel, a border moon rich in volatile gas and poor in morality. It housed 3 Valari outposts, a Tsar weapons depot, and several slave labor pits. Human boots hit dirt on a Monday. By Friday, Crassel was a crater. Valari broadcasts tried to spin it. Joint operation with unforeseen overreach. Terran troops improperly briefed. Rebels, not representatives. But off-world smugglers leaked drone footage. Humans hadn't just stormed the bunkers. They'd mined the gas pockets, hacked enemy drones to mimic distress signals, and baited both factions into an ambush. A single human engineer was recorded laughing as he triggered the chain reaction. No commands. No authorization. Just pure tactical annihilation. On a private Valari military channel, one commander whispered, "We unleashed something we can't put down." The Tsar didn't fare better. At first, they dismissed human tactics as primitive, using melee combat, sabotaging communication lines, deploying crude but effective viral code that made enemy ships broadcast Terran war chants on loop. But when Tsar High Marshal Kortha's flagship was overrun in 12 minutes by 7 humans with nothing but knives and magnetic boots, the Dominion's entire Fourth Fleet pulled back to defensive positions. And still, Earth said nothing. Avel Andros, the strategist who signed the original deployment orders, sent an encrypted message to Earth's planetary council. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," he wrote. The reply came back in one word. Correct. Earth hadn't declared war. Hadn't pulled from the treaty. Hadn't issued demands. They just stopped listening. The Valari, desperate to regain control, attempted a surgical strike on the largest unbroken unit. They sent 3 cloaked assassins into a Terran-occupied logistics post. What they found wasn't a base. It was a scrapyard wired into a fortress. The humans weren't hiding, they were waiting. The assassins never made it out. Their skulls were mailed back. Now, alien war councils across the galaxy whispered about Earth like a curse. The humans weren't building an army. They were building a movement. They were fighting not for territory, but retribution. The Valari Senate assembled in panic. "We should terminate the pact," one barked. "Can't," another said. "The humans never signed a full treaty. Technically, they were never ours to command. Then who's giving the orders?" Silence. Because the answer was chilling, no one. The humans weren't following protocol. They weren't following leaders. They were following pain, betrayal, and the cold math of revenge. On a backwater trading moon, a captured Valari captain begged his human interrogators for mercy. "I was just following orders," he sobbed. "So are we," the soldier replied, slicing the light from the man's eyes. By then, rumors had begun. That Captain Joel Rains had formed a hidden fleet. That Earth had recalled its diplomats not in shame, but in preparation. That Terran engineers were retrofitting lost Tsar dreadnoughts into planet killers. Nobody could prove it. But the Unbroken never ran out of weapons. Never ran out of fuel. Never ran out of names. And still, Earth said nothing. Until one day they did. A signal bounced across 30 star systems. A voice, male, calm, unmistakably human. "You dragged us into your war. You thought we'd bleed quietly. You thought we'd break. You thought wrong." He paused. "You woke something ancient. Something cruel. Something we buried deep because we hoped never to need it." Another pause. "Now, it's yours." They thought Earth was done. That Crassel 9 was a fluke. That the ghost of Joel Rains was just that, a ghost. The Valari even drafted a formal apology, dripping with political grease, offering compensation packages and symbolic gestures of solidarity. The document never reached Earth. Every transmission was intercepted and replaced with a single blinking message. "No contact permitted." By then, 3 more planets had gone silent. The Unbroken didn't follow chains of command, but they moved with terrifying precision. Strike teams blinked in and out of conflict zones like shadows. One unit called Gravehand hijacked a Valari supply route by turning its navigational AI into a philosophical existentialist. The convoy crashed itself into a gas giant when it failed to resolve the paradox of orders that had no moral basis. When questioned by survivors, a human simply said, "We taught your machines to think like us." They didn't like what they saw. The Tsar grew paranoid. They began pulling back from border systems. Surveillance footage showed humans weaponizing weather systems, poisoning atmospheric processors, and detonating sonic mines that only affected Tsar vocal frequencies. Entire regiments clawed at their own throats before they even saw a human. Valari commanders dismissed the reports as exaggerated. Until the Black Reef massacre. A full Valari garrison, 1,200 elite troops stationed in a cliffside fortress, reinforced with drones, mechs, and orbital turrets. Untouchable. At midnight the sea boiled. The Unbroken had seeded the ocean with thermal disruptors weeks earlier. As Valari sensors jammed from the heat surge, human divers rose from the surf, breathing recycled air through algae tanks, cutting silently through metal and bone. By morning, nothing was left but a beacon broadcasting a human nursery rhyme in a loop. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, The galaxy didn't laugh. Earth, meanwhile, said nothing. Again. They didn't need to. The message was clear: humanity no longer cared who started the war. They weren't in it for politics. They were in it for balance. On a neutral station orbiting the trade planet Veltar, a Tsar emissary was cornered by a human scout. "I have no quarrel with Earth," the Tsar insisted. "You do now," said the scout. "Because you didn't stop them. You watched. And now we're watching you." The Tsar tried to raise a weapon. He choked on nanodust before his fingers closed. Human tactics defied logic. They didn't move like armies. They moved like viruses, replicating, adapting, learning. Their tech wasn't elegant, but it was unpredictable. They strapped ship engines to asteroid hulls and called them battering rams. They hacked starport AI and had them play Terran war drums for days before a single drop troop landed. They didn't need numbers, they needed belief. And belief was spreading. In the slums of the Dirathi Belt, enslaved species whispered about human raids. "They don't take prisoners," one said. "But they don't leave slaves behind either." On the moons of Thalek V, labor camps revolted with stolen mining gear. Graffiti lined the walls and blood. "We are unbroken." Valari intelligence tried to track the spread. It wasn't military. It was ideological warfare, a species-wide insurgency with no formal flag, no chain of command, and no tolerance for delay. Resistance movements were forming not because of human diplomacy, but because humans were worse than the tyrants they destroyed, and somehow still preferable. At a clandestine summit, Valari and Tsar strategists met to discuss joint containment. "These humans," one Valari admiral sneered, "do not comprehend order. They're a chaos breed. Disease masquerading as sentience." A Tsar warlord responded grimly, "You misunderstand. They comprehend it. They just don't obey it." By then, 29 systems had fallen to unbroken sabotage. Not conquered, emptied. Governments dissolved, citizens fled, infrastructures sabotaged beyond repair. Entire data banks wiped. Trade routes scattered. The Valari tried countermeasures. They deployed neural disruptors, banned Terran frequencies, scrambled psychological warfare units. None returned. One recovered transmission played back a human voice, calm and unhurried. "You spent centuries sterilizing war. Regulating it. Ritualizing it. We didn't. We grew up in fire. We made history by stabbing it in the throat." The Valari Senate authorized Operation Starleech, a direct assault on what they believed was the unbroken command node on the jungle world Carthesa. 5 legions deployed. 17 dreadnoughts in orbit. 8 hours later, all transmissions ceased. One lone escape pod reached friendly space, its pilot insane, blood crusted under his nails. The only thing he'd say was, "They smiled. They all smiled when we burned." Earth's silence became unbearable. The Senate sent one final envoy. A last diplomatic gesture, laden with ceremonial robes, shields of peace, and 70 bodyguards. They never reached Earth. Mid-flight, they were intercepted. The feed cut to static, then flickered to life. A single Terran soldier stood in the center of the screen, face bloodied, eyes burning. He stared through the camera like he could see them watching. "You thought we'd beg. That we'd kneel for tech scraps. That we'd wear your colors like good little pets. You dragged us into your war thinking we'd die quietly, grateful." He leaned forward. "You turned Earth into a weapon. And now we've turned it on you." He paused. "Run." The feed ended. 12 hours later, a Valari armory exploded from the inside out. 2 more systems went dark. And Earth still hadn't spoken. Because the truth was simple. Humanity had already declared its position. Not with words. Not with treaties. With action. They were not part of the war. They were the reckoning. The Valari called it a containment maneuver. The Tsar labeled it a purgation protocol. Every major faction, shaken by the human spread, agreed to one desperate gamble: destroy the unbroken before they became irreversible. They pooled fleets, assassins, psyops agents, even war beasts bred for singular destruction. The target was Sector Juno 3, a mining belt where intelligence suggested the largest human rogue cell had dug in. 16 capital ships warped in with precision. They expected resistance. They expected chaos. They expected fury. What they didn't expect was silence. No return fire. No detected heat signatures. No comms. They swept the belt clean, blasting every rock, crevice, and suspected signal cluster. For 9 hours, they unleashed the fury of 3 empires. When the last detonation fell quiet, they sent drones to confirm the kill. The drones found one thing: a single Terran helmet floating in space. Inside was a recording. "You missed." Then Sector Theta 9 vanished. Not attacked. Not invaded. Vanished. 32 stations, over 200,000 personnel, gone without trace. Only one message blinked on the surviving relay buoy. "We're not in Juno anymore." The panic didn't wait. Systems withdrew. Civilian convoys rerouted. Supply chains snapped. But none of it mattered. Because by then, humans weren't just destroying armies, they were corrupting loyalty. The Dirathi, slave species of the Tsar, defected en masse, wearing stitched-together human armor. The Verilian hive, once allied with the Valari, began whispering of the Earth Ascendant. When questioned, their queen simply said, "They gave us fear we could believe in." On the moon of Calvon 8, a Terran broadcast jammed every screen. A woman appeared. Battle-worn, eyes like coiled steel. "You tried to make us your shield. Your distraction. Your cannon fodder. Now you get to see what happens when the shield learns to cut." She smiled. "And the cannon turns around." By now, the Unbroken weren't operating alone. They had the Turncoat Legion. Once Valari loyalists, now outlaws, the Turncoats were human-trained specialists who defected after witnessing the Crassel betrayal firsthand. Their leader, formerly Commander Viros Kal, removed his own neuro-compliance chip and burned it on broadcast, declaring, "I choose war. Not yours, theirs." Valari officials labeled him rogue. But too many followed. The Legion struck from within. Data leaks, command assassinations, sabotage. They didn't just fight the war, they broke its infrastructure. The Tsar tried to assassinate him. Sent 5 cloaked zealots with poison tips and anti-psi dampeners. Viros captured 3 alive, reprogrammed their neuroloyalty, and sent them back. The other 2? Shipped in separate boxes. A Senate report quietly admitted, "The humans fight with strategy not taught in any school. They weaponize morale. And worse, they do it with joy." The Valari attempted negotiations with Earth. They sent a fleet toward Sol, broadcasting peace signals, humanitarian terms, treaty offers. No answer. They tried orbital gifts, medical crates, technology bundles, cultural offerings. Still nothing. On the final approach to Earth's system, the fleet was intercepted, not by a warship, but by a single Terran courier drone. The drone played a 3-second audio clip. The sound of a heartbeat. Followed by the words, "Keep coming." They turned around. But it was already too late. The human force wasn't just spreading. It was replicating. With every enemy crushed, more defectors joined. Every liberated station became a forge. Every conquered freighter became a carrier. And every soldier lost was replaced by 10 more who knew the truth. Earth wasn't fighting for power, it was fighting for revenge. Valari morale crumbled. The upper command fractured. Senators fled. Armies deserted. In desperation, the Valari High Seat authorized Project Spiral, a forbidden quantum weapon designed to erase matter from causality itself. The cost? 1,000,000 lives. The gain? Eradicate the core human fleet in one strike. They activated it over Caratha's Void, the supposed location of the main unbroken fleet. But when the quantum field collapsed, the only things erased were the Spiral fleet itself and half of Valari space. Because the humans weren't there. They'd leaked false intel for weeks, baiting their enemy with the illusion of hope. And now that hope had consumed itself. The last Valari War Council met in secret. We can't fight this. They don't want terms. They don't need logistics. They're not even centralized. We're trying to crush shadows. One commander slammed his fist on the table. Then what do they want? The room fell still as a single voice replied, from the doorway. A man. Human. Burned, armored, eyes like frostbite. You. He detonated the room. The broadcast played live across Valari networks. Phase 3 complete, said a voice on the feed. Next, memory burn. And then, across every screen, station, and comm relay in Valari territory, a final message pulsed. You dragged us into your war. You trained us to kill. You abandoned us to die. Now you ask why we keep coming? A beat of silence. Then, in 1,000 synced languages. Because you made us good at it. It began with silence, too clean, too calculated. The kind of silence that only humans weaponized. Entire sectors stopped responding, and every known trace of unbroken activity vanished overnight. Not a retreat. A recalibration. The Valari believed they'd gained ground. Their analysts claimed the human network was splintering. Their data suggested exhaustion, overstretch. Even the Tsar started to pull forces back into core systems. Then the reports started coming in, whispers of lights inside the dark, of shadow fleets with no transponders, warforms with human signatures hacking control grids, and civilian hubs reporting zero casualties but complete political collapse. 3 systems went offline in 48 hours. The 4th was different. Valari Command received a fragmentary feed from the mining colony on Arx Kelta. A woman, bloodied and barefoot, stared into the lens. We told you we weren't soldiers, she said, voice calm. We're not peacekeepers. We're not ambassadors. We are what comes after all of those fail. She didn't blink. We are the end you earned. Then came static. Avail Andros returned from exile, summoned by the last surviving members of the Ascendancy's strategic board. His face was pale, his voice lower than ever. We're past the point of suppression, he said. We need to eliminate Earth. One admiral stood. Then we strike their homeworld. Now. Avelon turned his head slowly. We did. 3 weeks ago. The board froze. He continued. 32 ships. First Fleet. Vanished the moment they hit lunar orbit. One final transmission before silence. It said, hello, visitors. We've missed you. Earth didn't just vanish from NAV maps. It disappeared from memory. Archive corruption, erased coordinates, star charts rewritten. Systems that once held soul now return no data. Even old civilian maps showed black holes where Earth had been. The tech teams called it cognitive drift. The military called it terra ghosting. The truth? Earth had moved. Not the planet. The idea. Earth was no longer a place. It was a trigger. A frequency. A declaration of war encoded into space itself. A new pattern emerged. Unbroken forces began seizing only comm beacons and quantum hubs. Not for data. For resonance. They didn't want messages. They wanted sound. And then it began. One by one, every empire's military alert systems activated automatically, with no input. Automated sirens across systems that had never been touched by war began screaming. Not a warning of invasion. A warning of arrival. The Ghost Fleet emerged next. No fleet registration. No life signs. Just Terran architecture. Hulls covered in reflective alloys, seemingly motionless, but only until struck. One Tsar battleship collided with a Ghost destroyer. The Ghost ship folded its structure inward and passed through the Tsar like liquid metal. Moments later, the Tsar's ship detonated. Not from damage. From internal compromise. Code infection. Memory overload. Weapons turning inward. The humans had made AI that could feel hate. Worse, they'd given it targets. A subroutine inside every Ghost vessel echoed one phrase when translated. Resolution fulfilled. The Valari activated orbital purifiers. The Tsar deployed planetary void nets. Nothing worked. The Ghost Fleet didn't fight back. It didn't even defend itself. Because it didn't need to. It just arrived, and the enemy dissolved around it. The Terran High Command, presumed dead, appeared next, only not as military. Not as diplomats. But as something worse, survivors who had evolved beyond the concept of allegiance. A broadcast emerged from every captured system. A man stood at the center, body augmented, one arm black-gloved with fusion scars visible through the seams. "You tried to forget us," he said. "You used our flesh to prop up your war. You erased our names from your ledgers and called it mercy." His voice deepened. "But we remember." He gestured, and behind him, stars began to warp. "You taught us silence. We perfected it. You taught us betrayal. We surpassed it. You taught us death, and now we teach it back." He raised one hand. The screen filled with pulses, one per fallen system. Dozens. Then hundreds. "You wanted a blunt instrument. What you forged instead was a precision extinction protocol. We call it Earthfall." The broadcast ended. Then the wormholes opened. No Terran fleets. No warships. Just echoes. Reflected light forming human shapes across the vacuum of space, walking through nothing, bypassing sensors, ignoring gravity, existing without logic. The Tsar fired on one. The blast passed through, and every AI system in the sector flatlined. Not a soldier. A memory. That night, a signal hit every galactic system. A single Terran phrase spoken by thousands of different voices. "You dragged us into your war. Now we drag you into our silence." And then the blackouts began. Trade collapsed. Satellites fell. Gravity wells reversed. Entire colonies aged 200 years overnight. No bodies. No battles. Just a species made of vengeance, finally learning how to write its own myths. And the myths said one thing. If you find a place called Earth, run. They called it the Final Accord, a last-ditch summit between the remnants of the Valari ascendancy, fractured Tsar warlords, and terrified neutral factions that hadn't yet felt Earth's shadow. They met in a solar bastion outside contested space, guarded by quantum shields, drone sentries, and 3 layers of fail-safes. Everyone came armed. No one trusted each other. And for once, none of that mattered. Because humanity wasn't at the table. They were under it. The accord began with the usual posturing. Valari envoys demanded joint protocols. Tsar war counselors offered extermination algorithms. A Dirathi governor shouted until his translator sputtered static. But every voice quieted when the lights flickered. Not off. Just unsure. As if the energy in the room had stopped believing in itself. A Terran voice echoed from every direction. "No more speeches." Panic broke out. Weapons drew. Shields snapped on. Too late for panic. The lights died completely. Emergency backups kicked in, dim, red, uncertain. And standing at the center of the table was a human. No armor. No weapon. Just a black coat and scars that told older stories than any empire present. One Tsar general charged. The man didn't move. The general screamed halfway through the leap, and vanished. Not in blood. Not in smoke. Just ceased. The human looked at the table. "You should have let us die." Valari strategists tried negotiation. They offered reintegration. Amnesty. Resources. Earth could have a seat. Earth could be forgiven. The man smiled. "Forgiveness is a language we unlearned." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small sphere. It pulsed once. All screens in the galaxy, across every frequency, blinked to life. A countdown appeared, 1 minute. The Terran spoke again. "This is not a bomb. This is a mirror. When the countdown ends, every living being will see exactly what they did. Everything they allowed. Everything they ignored. No spin. No edits. Just truth." A Dirathi delegate snarled. "You can't guilt the galaxy into obedience." The human didn't even glance at him. This isn't guilt. This is debt collection. The sphere continued ticking. You dragged us into your war, thinking we were tools. Thinking we were meat that could shoot and bleed and bury your mistakes in mass graves labeled joint operations. You taught us your rules, your weapons, your cowardice. Then you left us behind. The Valari delegation tried a hard shutdown on the sphere. It laughed. Human laughter. Millions of voices recorded across centuries. You assumed we'd be grateful to die under your flags. You assumed we'd be manageable. You assumed wrong. 10 seconds. Across the galaxy, people froze. Civilizations paused. Even planets that had never heard of Earth felt something primal surge in their blood, fear without name, shame without context. The Terran took a breath. This isn't vengeance. This is balance. We're not here to rule. We're here to remember. And make sure you do, too. 0. The sphere vanished. And the galaxy watched. Every screen. Every wall. Every neural implant. The images spilled across the stars, humans begging for backup that never came. Unarmed civilians shot by retreating allies. Valari officers ordering human units into minefields for optical dominance. Tsar drones recording executions of Terran prisoners for morale studies. Then came the aftermath. The humans who survived. The ones who buried their squads and planted seeds in blood-soaked soil. The ones who forged knives from engine parts and built revolutions one heartbeat at a time. The ones who didn't stop. It lasted an hour. By the end, systems were in riots. Empires collapsed under their own guilt. Armies disbanded. Leaders wept on air. Some detonated their own command hubs before their people could see more. The Terran stood alone in the conference hall. No guards moved. No one could speak. You gave us a reason, he said. You gave us silence. Then you gave us war. And now we give you truth. He turned and walked toward the airlock. A Valari ambassador tried to speak. What happens now? The man stopped. Now? He looked over his shoulder. Now you live with it. He vanished into the corridor. Moments later, every human force in the galaxy disappeared. No trace. No trail. Not even a signal. And yet, they were still there. Every corner of space held rumors. Every unexplained system crash was blamed on them. Every time a leader rose too fast, too arrogant, too cruel, something happened. A storm, a breach, a shadow on the edge of the starfield. And in time, the galaxy changed. Not because humans ruled it. Because they reminded it what monsters look like, by becoming the mirror no one could look away from. And in every school, on every world that still dared to teach history, one line remained carved in every tongue. They dragged humans into the war. Now they wish they hadn't.